This next case I'm going to talk to you about is shared with the full knowledge and consent of the foster carers because it is so desperately harrowing. And I do need to include trigger warnings around suicide, mental health, being sectioned. So please just be aware about that. This is a particularly harrowing story. Last December, the Friday before Christmas, again, talking about Christmas, we received within our private members Facebook group messages from a foster carer who also messaged me directly and had emailed the advice line in an absolute state. It was about 7 o'clock at night, the Friday before Christmas. Obviously, I had plans with family, which then got put on hold, and I got straight in touch with her. She was absolutely distraught. I'm going to give you some background to this foster carer. She'd grown up in care herself and had become a foster carer because she really felt passionate about making a difference and doing things right and ensuring that young people had a good future. She'd always believed that she couldn't have children of her own and had fallen pregnant unexpectedly. At the time, she had 3 foster children living with her and a partner, and they'd been there for a number of years. And the plan was for them to continue living with the family. However, during the pregnancy, she became quite unwell, and it became clear that she was going to have to spend the last few months of her pregnancy in hospital. Now, her partner, his job meant that he was away from home on a regular basis, and this meant it was going to be very difficult for the children to remain without respite and support. Bear in mind, they did want the children to remain, but they were in an impossible situation. The foster carer grew up in care, so she didn't have family of her own. The foster carers were now by this time deceased, and her own foster carers. She didn't have a family background, and neither did he particularly. If he gave up working, then obviously that would affect the family income. So they were in a no-win, impossible situation. They asked for support and respite. Nobody wanted to offer it. So this led to the children having to move because he was going to be away for his job and the foster carer was going to be in hospital for several months because of this complicated, unexpected pregnancy. The children's social worker was very, very annoyed. Complete lack of understanding. Wrote a really unfavourable report about the foster carers, which, who does that? When you think about it, who does that? When you see a family in distress, going through a really difficult time, who've tried to work with you to keep those children in place, and your response is to express your anger and frustration and write people you've always praised, who've always had really outstanding reviews and praise, to suddenly be that petty and unpleasant towards them. Anyway, the children had to move, which they did. Foster care went to hospital. She had to have the baby delivered early. She was very, very ill, had to have emergency surgery afterwards. The baby was premature, was also very ill, had lots of complications. And they just managed to go home, and just before Christmas, settling down for the first Christmas together after such a traumatic time. The foster children were no longer with them, which was very sad. She was, like any new mum, struggling with exhaustion, but also in addition, she'd had an emergency cesarean surgery afterwards, a premature baby. All those feelings as well of like having grown up in care and being a mum, having grown up in care, all of that going on. 19th of December, 6:20 at night, I believe it was. Knock on the door. 2 social workers dressed in Christmas jumpers with sparkly bauble earrings, presumably come from their happy Christmas party, all smiles and jolly, knock on the door and say to this new mum care leaver with her 5-week-old baby who's just come home from special care. Oh, there's been an allegation. You can't be alone with your baby. Your partner needs to come home from work, or you need to have somebody round and you have to be supervised, but we can't tell you what it is. So that poor foster carer's whole world came crashing down that Friday before Christmas. Fortunately, we were there for her as a team, and I spent a long time on the phone to her that night and over the weekend, and in and through Christmas, supporting her and reassuring her that the baby hadn't been removed. That there was hope that things would work out okay, and that we were there for her. So this December came and went. January came and went. No information whatsoever. Trying to find out what the allegation was. Nobody was talking. Nobody would tell her. Didn't know what was happening. We were obviously emailing people, ringing people, the social workers, the local authority, to find out what was going on, because she was just an absolute wreck. We couldn't find anything out. They weren't telling us anything, even though legally they should have done. So we got to the 6th of February of this year, and it was about 7 o'clock at night when an email came in to our advice line from the foster carer. And we all keep an eye on things out of hours in case there is something, an emergency, because people can be very upset, or there can be emergency removals of children that we need to protect children and foster carers from. And something about the email was, we all were deeply concerned for her welfare. It was basically, thank you for everything you do. Thank you for the fight that you're doing for foster carers and children in care, but I can't go on anymore. Please do this fight for others and for my child. And one of the team contacted me and other members of the team, and we all said, yeah, no, that we were, alarm bells were ringing. So we rang her partner, who was away for work, and said, look, we're really concerned. So obviously her partner, warned people. She'd left the baby with her mother-in-law, and so he'd got in touch and realised she had gone. And we were contacted later to be informed that, and this is, it's still difficult to talk about it. It was incredibly upsetting and just awful. Basically, if we hadn't have notified her partner, she would have been dead, because she'd taken a massive overdose and she'd gone into the forest where she lived at the time, basically, as she put it, to find a quiet place to die in peace. And I just, this is hard to talk about, but we need to. She was found by Mountain Rescue and the police, and they said that if they'd not found her within an hour, she would have been dead, which means that newborn baby would have never have known his mum. So we then, she was sectioned and held for, I think, about a week, and I spoke to her every day. We kept in touch with her. We kept reassuring her that we were there for her. Obviously, we went absolutely ballistic, is the only way to describe it, with the local authority, and basically said, you are so damn lucky that we were there and she was found, because you would have had a serious case review on your hands and an inquest. We would have made sure you did. Still, the reason she was so distraught was the fact that she's still no idea what she was supposed to have done. There was no news. She'd gone all that time trying to recover from the birth and being a new mum and all of that, without knowing what she was accused of. And she still didn't know. So the result of us really pushing them was that they just decided there was going to be no further action, and they all kind of ran away, hid under the duvets, and tried to pretend it never happened. They never continued. They didn't continue with the investigation. Literally nothing. It was just dropped. So now we're just about approaching a year since this happened, and guess what? We still don't know what the allegation was, because they refused to tell her. We've done a subject access request. Have said it's, they'd have to respond to it. We've done all sorts of things, pointed out all the legislation, everything to them, and they've just shut down. So currently it's with the Ombudsman. Obviously, they think they can avoid these things, but we've learned very quickly years back to involve regulatory bodies that they can't ignore. So we're just waiting to see if the Ombudsman comes back to us and we finally get some information about what it was all about. But can you imagine being left not knowing what you're even supposed to have done, to be put through that? The callous heartlessness of turning up at someone's house the Friday before Christmas in Christmas jumpers with sparkly bauble earrings, all jolly and happy, and saying, "Oh, you can't be alone with your newborn baby. There's an allegation, but we can't tell you what it is," and then trotting off to enjoy your Christmas lunch and your Christmas presents, oblivious to the bombshell that you've dropped and the harm that you've caused. They destroyed her life, and that time with a newborn child, she'll never get that back. She can never go back and enjoy being a mum. She never expected to be a mum. She believed, that she couldn't have a child of her own. And that should have been a joyous miracle. It should have been something to celebrate. She's still suffering now. She's still emotionally distraught, and that's understandable. Partly because she doesn't know what she's supposed to have done, and secondly because having an emergency section and then another operation and a premature baby and everything that she's been through, that's hard in itself. Add another layer onto that of having grown up in care yourself and all of the trauma and feelings of inadequacy that brings. And, I can't get my head around the callousness, the cruelty, the lack of morals, the emotional coldness that these people must have to do something like that and to refuse to own it, to refuse to apologise, to refuse to accept that things could have been done better. They've literally just turned the back, closed the case, said there's no further action, and all got on with their lives. No cleaning up the nuclear waste that they left behind from their actions. No acknowledgement that perhaps things could have been done differently. No reflection. And I just think, that's one case that I've described, but we have so many cases where people have had heart attacks, suffered strokes, lost their homes, attempted suicide. We have people in the past who have succeeded. And it's like, I I can't I can't even articulate how upsetting and frustrating it is that this is allowed to continue. And no matter how many times we bring it to the attention of Department of Education, government ministers, all of these people, everybody just turns their back. And in the meantime, the cost to the taxpayer increases all the time, and they're like, "Oh, we're wasting billions in private provision." Like, well, deal with the problem. Stop putting your fingers in your ears and your hands over your eyes and actually deal with the problem. You know what the problem is. And if you until you address it, people are literally losing their lives. So yeah, we will get justice. We'll get justice for this family, for this amazing foster carer who grew up in care herself, who wanted to do the right thing, for what was stolen from her. That joy of that new baby and first Christmas and all of that was stolen, and for everybody else, we will get justice.